welcome back to another episode of Heebie Jeebies TV. Now, in today's episode, we're going to talk about another true crime case, and this one is insane. I was reading it and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. I legit thought this was something out of like a creepypasta, or that maybe this was some sort of, I don't know, crazy story that you would only hear or see actually on TV or in the movies. It just was so unbelievable, one thing after the other that just made it seem more and more unlikely. So before we get into today's story, obviously I just want to send a quick reminder to please consider subscribing. If you guys enjoy this type of content, we post 2 to 3 times a week and we talk about stuff like true crime, unsolved mysteries, and the paranormal. So today's story is going to be about a man called Issei Sagawa, and he actually earned the nickname the Celebrity Cannibal Killer, not because he cannibalized celebrities, but because he actually became a sort of celebrity himself with this crime. So it became a very big thing. This was in the early 80s and it was all over the news internationally, actually. And the story is very unbelievable. So I do want to give a fair warning that if you guys are sensitive to gruesome facts, gruesome stories, then definitely don't watch this video. It's pretty gross. So if that creeps you out, join me in the next one. So Issei Sagawa was born on April 26, 1949 in Kobe, Japan. Now, he was born to a wealthy family. This will play a role later on. His parents were very, very rich, but unfortunately, money could not solve all of their problems because Issei was actually born as a premature baby. Now, this would affect the way he would grow up, and it would affect him the rest of his life because being born at such a premature age, he actually didn't develop the way a normal baby would have. So as he was getting older, he, especially as a man, he didn't grow. He wasn't very tall. He was barely 5 feet tall. He was very, very thin. And he would actually refer to himself as a small, weak man. So growing up was obviously very difficult for him. He was not very comfortable in social situations. He would actually avoid them. I guess you would say he had a form of social anxiety, to the point where he really found a lot of comfort in books and literature and actually became somewhat of an intellectual. Unfortunately, even finding comfort in other areas of life, this really didn't make up for the lack of confidence he had. He was a very, very insecure man. And it's actually speculated that the reason for him committing these crimes was a form of revenge. In an interview he gave, he actually said that his ultimate goal was to absorb the energy of his victims. Now, this all started when Issei was a small child, when he was really young. He said he had a dream. And in this dream, he said that he and his younger brother were in a pot of boiling water, ready to be eaten by someone. Now, it was from this dream or nightmare, whatever you want to call it, he said that he started to develop the curiosity of what it would be like to be the person eating other people. Now, this curiosity and this dream soon actually turned into a crazy, unhealthy obsession with the thought of cannibalism. He would actually start fantasizing about this when he was really, really young, still in grade school. He recalled fantasizing about a classmate of his who was a little boy. After actually catching a glimpse of his thigh, I guess the child was wearing shorts and a part of it rode up, and Issei saw this, and this really just put his fantasies into overdrive. He fantasized about what it would be like to eat this young boy. So he managed to restrain himself while he was growing up, but this changed when he started going to university. So he actually enrolled at Waco University in Tokyo. And he actually decided to enroll in German classes. He was a fan of literature, like I mentioned earlier, and he was interested in languages, so he decided to take German. This is where he actually had a German lady, actually teach his class, and this actually created another unhealthy obsession with him. He grew to really, really love this type of woman. It wasn't just her. He had a deep fixation for tall, blonde, light-skinned, blonde hair, blue-eyed European women. So one night he took this obsession to the next level. So he spotted a woman he really, really liked, and he decided to follow her home. Now, when she got to her home, he kind of didn't really have a plan. He didn't know what he was going to do. He kind of just sat there outside of her home watching her from the window. So he waited there until night and decided to finally break in. Initially, later on, when he gave an interview, he said that he didn't want to kill her. He didn't want to hurt her. He just wanted to, he said he wanted to literally taste her and to take a piece of her with him. So when he breaks into this woman's house, he's standing at the foot of her bed and looking for some sort of weapon to knock her out with. But luckily, this woman sensed that there was something wrong. There was someone in her room. So she wakes up and she sees him at the foot of her bed. She starts freaking out. She starts screaming. And she was able to, fortunately, call the police, and they were able to arrest him. Now, remember how I said that he had a very wealthy family? So his father found out about what was going on. And because he didn't actually physically assault the woman, a lot of these charges were dropped. All he technically did was break and enter. And so his father, using his money, he was able to pay off the entire situation. He was able to pay off the woman, pay off the police, and basically make the entire thing go away. However, it was after this situation that Issei realized that he should probably go get some help. Fantasizing about eating people probably isn't normal. So he decided to go see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist, though, gave him news he wasn't expecting to receive. He actually deemed him a danger to society and actually was ready to implement some more serious, solutions to make sure that he didn't actually hurt someone later on. But as soon as Issei's father found out about what was going on, he said, "No, this is not happening. You're not putting my son away." So he decided to actually send him overseas. So in 1977, Issei's father ships him off to Paris, and he actually enrolls at the University of Paris. Here is when Issei starts thinking about that night where he broke into the woman's home, thinking about how close he had gotten to actually fulfilling his fantasies. He really, really resented the fact that he didn't have a proper plan in place. So these next few years, he actually spent thinking about how he would commit the perfect crime and how he would be able to actually get what he wanted. Now, during these times, he actually frequented quite a bit with call girls. He would actually order or pick one up almost every single night in order to try to make this fantasy of his come to life. However, he never actually succeeded in this because when it came down to actually doing the deed, he said that he couldn't bring himself to do it. So we fast forward to 1981. He's still enrolled at the University of Paris, except now he sees a woman that is very, very beautiful. She was a stunning woman, and her name was Renee. She was a 25-year-old Dutch student who was actually studying French literature at the university. And as soon as Issei saw her, he developed this mesmerized obsession with her. He thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and all he could think of was how to get as close to her as possible. So again, using his father's money, Issei was able to falsify, a relationship or some sort of friendship with Renee. What he did was use his father's money to pay Renee to teach him German. I know she said she was a Dutch national, but apparently she also spoke German. So he had actually hired her to be his private tutor. Now, this relationship actually developed into more of a friendship. Sadly, Renee didn't actually know the true intentions behind this, but Issei would actually groom her as much as he could. He would take her out to different events. They would go to dinner together. They would spend time at each other's houses. As far as Renee was concerned, she actually considered Issei to be a friend of hers. Eventually, Issei decided to shoot his shot and tried hitting on her, but Renee was very quick to shut that down. She told him that she just didn't see him that way, that she didn't want a romantic relationship with him, and that they should really just stay friends. So one night, Issei actually decided to invite Renee over to his apartment. He initially had told her that he actually wanted her to come over, not just for dinner, not just to hang out, but that he was actually working on a project where he wanted her to recite a German poem where he would be voice recording her. So she agrees. She doesn't suspect anything. She goes over to Issei's and they start hanging out. But when she least expected, when she wasn't looking, he actually goes around behind her, pulls out a gun that he was hiding somewhere, and shoots her in the back of the neck, where she dies instantly. So initially, Issei starts freaking out, so much so that he actually passed out. He fainted after realizing what he had done. So he's knocked out for a few hours, and then when he wakes up, he starts freaking out all over again at realizing what he had just done. So at first, he thought to himself that he needed to do the right thing. He needed to call the ambulance. He needed to call 911. But then the devil kind of creeped in inside of his mind, told him he would be absolutely crazy to let go of this opportunity. The opportunity that he had been searching for his entire life was literally right in front of him. And so he did. That's what literally Issei decided to do. He took advantage of Renee's lifeless body and started undressing her, removing her clothing articles, assaulting her, and then pondering about which piece he wanted to try first. So when I was doing research on this, there are articles out there that go into a lot of detail about how he ate her body, about how he dismembered her, what he tried doing with pieces of her body. I can't really go into that on here because it is super, super graphic. So if you guys are interested in that, I recommend you guys just Google it and you can find out for yourselves. But to sum it up for you, basically he said that she tasted like tuna sashimi and that her meat was so delicious that when he put it in her mouth, it kind of just melted. And to make this entire thing even creepier and more disturbing, he actually assaulted her over and over again while listening to the recording that Renee had just recited before her death of the German poem. So the next morning comes around and Issei realizes that he can't really keep her body around for much longer. So he wakes up and decides to cut off a few more pieces that he wants to keep and preserve for later before starting to think about what he's going to do with her body. His initial plan was actually to continue dismembering her, so much so that she would be able to fit in a large suitcase, and then he would take the suitcase and dump it in a lake somewhere. So he starts doing this, but because he's only 4'9", he was having a really hard time considering how tall Renee was. Remember, he had a taste for very tall European women. So considering his size, this was a very big mission for him. So he was able to get her body chopped up into the suitcase, but when it came to actually moving the suitcase, he hit a roadblock. So initially he wanted to call a cab to take the suitcase to a lake somewhere. So he's exiting the apartment with this large suitcase and he's struggling. He's barely able to move it, and people are noticing. He's having such a hard time that people are kind of just offering him to help. Do you need help moving the suitcase? And he's telling everyone, no, I got it. Don't worry about it. But then people start noticing that there's blood coming from this suitcase. So he freaks out, doesn't know what to do, and instead just decides to literally just abandon the suitcase in the middle of the city, I guess. It's not really detailed as to where he put it. I'm not sure if he tried to hide it in an alleyway somewhere or if he literally just left it in the middle of the street. So he ditches the suitcase and runs back to his apartment to continue enjoying the last few cuts of meat that he kept for himself. It only took 2 days for police to kind of put all of the pieces together, and they actually went back to his apartment where they found him. And when they searched his apartment, they actually found several pieces of Renee's body stored in his freezer. And the weird part is that he didn't even try denying that he had killed Renee. He kind of just went along with the entire thing and said, yes, it was me. I did it. I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted to taste her. So the trial comes along, and the judge is listening to the story. He's listening to what happens, and right away he's like, this guy is not sane. No sane person would ever think these thoughts or would ever even come close to doing anything like this. So he labels him as incompetent to start trial and actually sentences him to go to a mental hospital for further evaluation. So I'm sure, as you've guessed by now, his father again steps in and uses his money to save his son. So his father, I guess, I don't know who he bribed, how much he spent, but he was able to convince the French system and the French authorities to transfer his son to a mental hospital in Japan. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this story did get a lot of fame. It was all over the place. And so the Paris police were not super inclined to keep this kind of fame going, especially around someone that would do something like this. So it's believed that this played a role in them wanting to transfer him out of the city and out of the country. Now, because the French courts had actually deemed him incompetent to stand trial, that meant that they actually dropped all charges and closed the case. This meant that the Japanese authorities were not able to pursue the same charges. They were not able to reopen the case. So upon arriving in Japan, Issei actually spent 15 months in this mental hospital. But this is the crazy part. This is the kicker. He actually checks himself out on his own. No one tried to stop him. Checks himself out in August of 1986. No questions asked, and that's it. To this day, Issei is still alive. He lives in Tokyo, and he's living the life of a free man. And the worst part of all of this is that not only did Renee's family not get justice for what happened, but he actually became a weird celebrity out of all this. He started making money off of this. He started giving interviews. He actually wrote books. He was a guest speaker. He was raking in quite a bit of money off of this entire situation. Fortunately, this didn't really last long because he was so famous. His face was plastered all over the internet. Eventually, his 15 minutes of fame dried up, and this led to him being jobless. He had to go look for a job, but because he was so well known, nobody wanted to give him a job. So basically, he was left to live off of welfare. So in 2013, he actually suffered a cerebral infraction, which basically rendered him paralyzed. He now requires 24-hour care. So I guess you can call that some sort of karma. But in an interview before this happened to him, before he was no longer able to move around freely, he actually gave an interview. And in this interview, he actually talked about his desire, that because he had not gotten any help, his desire was still alive and very much active inside of his head. He said that his lifelong dream would be to taste the human flesh again at least one more time before he died. Except this time, he no longer really cared for tall European women, that this time he actually wanted to try the meat of a Japanese woman. And that's it. Like I said, he is a free man. He can't really move. He can't really do much, but that defeats the point. The point is that Renee's family didn't get justice. He didn't serve any sort of time. There was really no punishment for him because he was able to get away with a mental illness in this situation, which makes the whole story extremely unbelievable. It's crazy how the systems were able to not seal these loopholes for him to get away with something like this. What do you guys think about crimes or cases like these where people are able to get their charges dropped because they plead not guilty due to insanity or some sort of mental health issue? What do you guys think about these sort of cases? Do you think people should be able to get away with murder? Do you think there should be some sort of reform? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you guys have any other case suggestions, we've been getting some and we are working on some. There are quite a few interesting stories out there. So if you guys have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below and we will see you in the next video.